today's Association for Manufacturing Excellence webinar titled How to Sustain Your 5S Improvements. I am Jerry Strohmeyer, the Education and Training Program Coordinator for AME, and I will be your moderator. Today's presenter is David Visco, the founder and president of the 5S Store. David is an experienced 5S coach and 5S event leader. He offers 5S advice to major corporations as well as small and medium-sized companies. David has almost 30 years of inventory control and warehouse management experience in various industries, including medical device, distribution, and electronics. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping items. You will be in listen-only mode throughout the webinar. You will see that you are muted on your attendee panel on the right side of your screen. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them into your question area in the attendee panel and click on Submit. We'll review the questions at the end of today's presentation and answer as many as we can. When you log off today, please check your email inbox, and it will be an invitation and link to fill out a short webinar attendee survey. Please take a few minutes to complete the survey today, as your feedback is very important to us to improve future webinars. David has also graciously agreed to provide a PDF of today's presentation. We will be sending that along with a recorded link for a webinar replay to each of you next week. Now, I am pleased to introduce David Visco, who will present How to Sustain Your 5S Improvements. Take it away, David.
Thanks, Jerry. Appreciate that. Hi, everybody. Thanks for attending the webinar today. As Jerry said, we're going to be discussing how to sustain your 5S improvements. Certainly one of the more challenging pieces of 5S, and I'm hopeful this is going to help you out. So let's get going. All right, the agenda today. So we're going to discuss, first of all, why you're here, why you want to listen to me, of all people, because there is a lot of experts out there regarding 5S, but I'll explain to you why I think I'm going to be able to help you out, what the benefits of a successful 5S program are, and most importantly, the steps that you're going to take to sustain your 5S program. We'll follow that by a Q&A session. I really look forward to that part of it because I'm anxious to help you out. Okay. So, who is this webinar for? Well, it's for you if you're tired of starting and stopping 5S. I've spoken to tons of people over the years, and boy, doesn't that happen a lot. The reasons for that are plentiful, but I'm hopeful we're going to be able to give you some strategies so you can stop doing that over and over and over again. This webinar is also for you if your team isn't on board. So you may have some folks that love 5S, other folks that are just kind of in between, and then there's those folks that just really don't get it and don't want to join you on the journey. We'll talk about that as well. If your 5S scores just simply aren't acceptable, we'll discuss audits at great length. We'll be able to help you today if you've had inconsistent improvement trends. So maybe for a few months you've been able to maintain and improve your 5S program, but then it might drop down for a little while, or it might just totally crash, or then you crank it once again. So we'll work on trying to get some steady consistency in your 5S improvements. And of course, if you're frustrated with your 5S program, this can certainly help, because one of the bigger parts that causes frustration in 5S is just the inability to sustain it. And lastly, if you have a 5S program but you just want to make it better, this webinar is going to help you out. Okay. So why listen to me of all the people that are out there regarding 5S? Jerry went over this, but I'll give you a quick summary. So I've been around 5S for years. I am considered a 5S expert. I founded the store, the 5S store, back in 2006, along with my wife. I did that after going through an initial 5S training for a medical device company I was working at, and I thought 5S was just fantastic. So I needed all supplies to implement 5S, and I couldn't find them anywhere. So we came up with that idea for the store. And over the years, as a result of that, I have just lived and breathed 5S for the last 10 years now. We've been in business for 9, but it's just everything I've focused on and learned about and trained on, and I've continued to fail at 5S. You know, you're never 100% perfect in anything you do, especially in the interest of continuous improvement. You know, we try, we fail, we learn, we try, we fail, we learn, and we consistently do that, and I have done that for so long now. I'm still learning things, and I want to pass those on to you. So I'm also coming out with a book later this summer called 5S Made Easy by Productivity Press. And I think you'll really enjoy that when that comes out. It gives you a step-by-step how-to with 5S. So I know a lot about 5S, and I'm here to help you to improve in that regard. Okay. The benefits of a successful 5S program are pretty straightforward. Most people on this call probably know what they are. But, you know, there was a recent study that said that up to 1/3 of a worker's day is spent looking and searching for materials, tools, information, or direction. And, I mean, 1/3 of the day, you do the math, that's pretty costly in a whole lot of levels. So a 5S program can eliminate most of that waste. A ton of our time is spent just looking and searching for tools. You know, where is my screwdriver? Where's the pallet jack? Where's the forklift? What am I supposed to do next? And once you have a 5S program in place, that'll help remove all those issues. And you'll continue to improve upon it as well to make it as efficient as possible and have a safer work environment. 5S also instills a culture of accountability, which I talk about at length. I think accountability is absolutely key. It'll empower the workforce, certainly, and it's one of the foundational tools of all continuous improvement practices. So, if you happen to be out on a manufacturing floor or at a company and they had a successful 5S program, what would it look like? Well, I think you can agree what you would see is, you know, tools are put away, but it's done habitually. It isn't done because you have a 5S program and, oh my God, I have to put my tools away. It's just done automatically. You clean up at the end of the day, you put your stuff away. You know, everybody knows the saying, you know, everything has its place, right? A place for everything and everything in its place. The work that you're doing is self-directing, and the status is evident, meaning, for example, like your Kanbans are very clear, right? The color coding that you've used or that you've put in place makes sense. Anybody can walk in off the street and understand exactly what's going on. A successful 5S program also has workers that are implementing the improvements on their own. They don't have management shoving it down their throat. You know, they don't have supervisors sitting there doing a tool board for them. They don't have consultants coming in and laying out tape. The workers have taken control of their own workspace. The area is clean and organized. So there's some fantastic companies out there I've seen that have a really good 5S program, and you could practically eat off the floors. They're just so clean and organized. They're incredibly safe as well, which is certainly a benefit of 5S. And the area is always tool ready. So with that, you know, at one place that I had implemented 5S as an employee, I used to tell the group, I say, you know, pretend the president of the company is coming through here and they're going to have ABC in the building to show off the place. Would you feel comfortable with him just showing up, cameras on scene, and you being on the news in your area? Your place is always tour ready. That is another example of a great 5S program. And of course, the workplace takes pride in their area. So everything they do, they just naturally take pride in what they do. Okay. So there are 5 steps to sustain 5S, and we're going to go over each one of these in detail. The steps are to communicate regularly, Management's role in 5S, which I call the management musts. The third step is developing solid standards. Next step is having a robust audit program. As much as everybody or a lot of people don't really care for audits, they're incredibly important and valuable in a 5S program. And for what I think is the most important step in sustaining 5S is holding people accountable. So with regards to communicating regularly, there's 5 different things that you can do in that regard, and we'll go into each one of these. You can incorporate 5S updates during weekly meetings, post results throughout the plant, develop 5S message boards, create a newsletter, or implement a rewards and recognition program. We'll go into each one of these now. So from a weekly meeting form, we used to use these at a company I was at, and it's very simple and straightforward. It's just basically a meeting form that you hold during weekly meetings. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry about that. What you'll do is if you have let's say you have a department or a group of a dozen people or so, each week you're going to hold a 5S team weekly meeting, and you're going to use this form to do so. So in the beginning of the form, you're talking about achievements, right? What did the group do for the week that was noteworthy? And you go through those. And it's really important to make sure you focus on the achievements. It's all too easy to focus on the areas that need improvements, which is something you still have to go over, of course. That's the second part of this simple little form, is to discuss areas that do need improving, discuss ideas, come up with solutions. From there, you very quickly just go over the recent audit scores. So everybody's on the same page and everyone knows where we're at. So you discuss like the current score for that week and then take a look at the previous couple of weeks to see where you're trending. At the end of the meeting, and this is incredibly important and usually something that's skipped, is making sure to follow up on any action items that were given the previous week. All too often, I've seen 5S programs that are pretty robust in a lot of areas, and you'll see the audit forms and you'll see improvements that are noted and whatnot. But I don't see the follow-up piece, and the follow-up piece is absolutely critical. So without that, what's the point? If people don't feel that they're going to be held accountable to follow up on the action items that they were presented earlier on, then they're not going to follow through with them, and you won't get the improvements that you need. So very simple process. I used to do this for maybe a half an hour a week with the team every week, just to keep everybody on track. 5S message boards. Well, there's many ways to present your 5S program throughout your plant. This is just one that I think I snagged off the internet at some point. Very straightforward. It has before and after pictures, and then it also, you can see there it's got a group showing the participants, so the people that were involved in that particular improvement, and then details of the improvement that was made. It's a very simple, straightforward board. You don't have to get too crazy with these. I've seen some that are just humongous, and they got so much detail on them, nobody even bothers to look at them. So another great idea with these boards is have the folks in the area work on the board, not just some lean champion or auditor or whatnot. Get involvement from the group. Maybe have them take some of the pictures or fill out part of the detail sheet that's there. But involvement will really help you throughout, and put these in more than one place in your facility too. It really helps. Communication examples such as reward and recognition pins. You can have a banner where everybody signs their name to the banner saying everybody's committed to 5S. That's kind of a nice idea. Or you can use t-shirts or what have you, just to get everybody on board with 5S. Management must, the second piece of sustaining your 5S improvements. Well, management absolutely, positively must get out on the floor and promote 5S. They must walk around the plant, pointing out the good and the bad, giving people attaboys when need be. You know, everybody likes to get approval and hear that they've done a good job. And if management truly wants to get folks on board with sustaining their 5S program, going out on the floor and talking about it is significant. I've certainly been at places where the GM or even the operations director or whatnot barely ever go out there and discuss 5S. They're always talking about efficiencies or you know, downtime or what have you, as opposed to bringing 5S into the conversation. One way of doing that, and I don't have that here, is to use what's called like a management walk card. It's an idea that I had learned from GBMP, the folks that are famous for their Toast Kaizen DVD. It's actually who I trained through years ago, but they had these management walk cards, and they would have one that has an achievement area on it, and then they have another one that's an improvement one. So what you do is you'd leave those around the area that either needed achievement or that had achievements visible, or where there were areas for improvement involved. And you leave those behind, and you follow up with the folks. And it's really a cool, very simple solution to use. It lets people know management's involved, which is really critical. Management must go through 5S training. For managers to hold people accountable in expectations to have a 5S program in their plant and then not go through the training themselves is just, in my eyes, hypocritical. You need to understand what it is you're asking of your folks. And when I say go through 5S training, I don't mean watch a DVD or read a book. I'm talking about going out, implementing some 5S improvements, being part of a team, which is the third bullet there, really getting involved, really understanding it, not managing the events by any stretch, just being a participant, one of the gang. It'll go a long way with the rest of the group to see that you truly are engaged and involved. Management must support 5S. So what does that mean? Well, it means a lot of different things, one of which is to make sure that regardless of how busy you get during your hockey sticks or your spikes, or you know, you got a big order, it's got to get out the door, there's still no reason for you to all of a sudden drop a 5S program. I hear that all the time when I'm like if I'm at a trade show or whatever, and people come up to me and talk, and I ask them, you know, how's your 5S program going? They say, well, it was great until ... And a lot of times it'll be, you know, we just got too busy. And that's really a shame, because if that's happening, that means management isn't supporting the 5S program. Once you have it in place, it really shouldn't take more than a few minutes a day for everybody to do their part, just to stay on top of the program itself. I mean, yeah, you're going to have your audits, right? And you have to do your initial training to get the foundation in place. But once you have it in place, it should not be so time consuming that when you get busy, the whole program just has to go to, you know, to go to pot. There's no reason for that at all. That's just a really bad excuse. What that means is people don't understand the true value of 5S, because if they did, they wouldn't let it crash and burn like that. So management has to support 5S all the way through. And it doesn't have to cost a lot of money either. I mean, most of the supplies that you could get would cost you less than a couple $100 a year, so there's really no need for that. Management must focus on the people in their 5S efforts. So it is critical for management to make sure that the people get the skills that they need, and that they get, you know, the praise when they've done a good job. By focusing on the people, what that means is there's a level of training that's necessary, and they're going to make sure that they allow that to happen. And also be prepared to promote 5S at every chance that you get. They've got to hold people accountable. Accountability to me is absolutely key for a 5S program to stay in place. So we'll talk about that much more in depth in the last section. And I don't know how many times I've been told people have had 5S done to them. I'll give you a great example. I'll never forget about this. I was at a plant. I was asked to come in and kind of do a tour and assess their 5S program. And we're walking through, whoops, sorry about that. And I come upon this beautiful tool board. So it was a workstation, and this tool board, a nice pegboard with tool shadows, and it was very attractive. It looked great. And there was a gentleman there working at the workbench. So I said to him, I said, geez, you know, this looks fantastic. You know, what did you do? You know, how do you like it? He said, I hate it. And there was a GM standing right next to me. I said, you hate it? And he said, why is that? Of course, I knew what he was going to say. He says, because I had nothing to do with this. I was away for a few days, and I came back, and this is what I walked into. And the tools aren't where I need them. And I'm still missing some tools, as a matter of fact, and I have too many of some other tools. So it was a great example of how not to do it to them. So, you know, you want, as a manager, you want to support your folks, you want to help your folks, you want to give them the supplies and the training they need, but by all means, don't do it to them. Just help them. That's what you're there for. Okay, standards. You have to have standards for a 5S program to stick. And without this, you might as well not even bother. We'll talk about each one of these in a separate slide. So the standards you got to keep an eye on are making sure that non-conformance is easy to detect. Make sure you have color standards in place. You can utilize what's called a 5S maintenance chart, which I'm going to show you. You have to have a robust audit plan, which we'll cover in another section. And consistency is golden. It's the absolute key. So here's an example of making non-conformance obvious. So this here is in conformance, an example of somebody doing the right thing. So you can see what we did by the yellow arrows is we numbered the dolly and we numbered the parking slot. You can see that depicted with the two yellow arrows there. So let's say this dolly had a number 2 on it and it was sitting in the number 3 slot. Well, that's a pretty obvious non-conformance. So what you got to do is make sure to set up your standards in a way so that when things are out of sort, if you will, or out of conformance, that it's clear to anybody. Making it unclear where something should go and whatnot is a broken standard. If you don't have clear standards, people aren't going to know what's expected of them, in which case you've set them all up to fail to begin with. 5S visual color standards. There's a lot of different standards out there for colors. Some are pretty general. Some folks will follow an OSHA type of guideline. I get asked often if there is one 5S color guideline out there, and I have yet to find it. This is one that I happen to use, but you know, you can certainly make your own. The key is to make it the standard throughout the plant. So what I like to use is using red for quarantine. You know, most of this is very obvious, but a lot of folks will use yellow for like aisle marking and pallet corners and that type of thing. You could use green for Kanbans, blue for tools like trash cans and pallet jacks and whatnot. And these three are pretty much in line with OSHA, but you use black and yellow for safety or caution, black and white for electrical, or red and white for warehouse lanes, or I've also seen red and white used for like when you're marking off fire extinguishers and that sort of thing. The key with the color standards is to make sure that everybody knows what they are. That's the whole point behind having a standard. It goes back to setting clear expectations. One company I was at fairly recently, as I was doing a tour, I noticed that all the pallets were marked off with yellow, which was great. But I didn't see any sign like this anywhere in the plant. So I said to them, I said, you know, how do people know what colors to use? And they said, well, they just know. I said, okay, well, I said, where did they learn about that? And they said, well, they got it during orientation. I'm like, okay, well, you know, forgive me, but most people forget about what they've learned in orientation after about a day. So my suggestion is to post your color standards throughout the plant so everybody knows what they're supposed to be using. On that note, make sure that you always have the right materials available. A big miss is to run out of 5S materials like floor tape and corner markers and whatnot. I'm going a little off script here, but it's super important that if you want folks to maintain the area and keep everything marked off and whatever, you have to make sure that you always have enough supplies in stock. The worst thing for any person that wants to go replace a corner marker or a ripped poster or, you know, some document that needs to be redone is for them not to be able to do so as soon as they think about doing it. So make sure you always have the supplies that they need available. Okay. 5S maintenance chart. This is a cool chart that I borrowed from Cresco. Scott Garvin, who used to be the president of the Northeast region for AME, is the president of a consulting firm, Cresco, and he allowed me to use this for the training. It's actually going to be in my book as well, but it's a great little tool, and it'll be in the PowerPoint if you folks want to borrow this. It's a nice way to keep the area cleaned, keep equipment lubricated and on track, and I can email a file as well if folks ask me to, so that you can change the dates and mix it up a little bit. But it's a great chart to use for staying on top of maintenance requirements. Everybody's favorite topic is audits. So one of the top 5 things you need to have to sustain a 5S program is a robust 5S audit plan. As much as most people don't really care for doing audits, it's absolutely key for a whole host of reasons. But in order to have a robust 5S audit plan, you have to make sure that everybody knows why you're doing the audits in the first place. You want to communicate the benefit to them. Let them know that the audits are not meant to slap people's wrists and to give people a hard time when they're, you know, missing their goals and where they're having issues on their scoring. The benefits behind the audits are substantial, but for the most part, the idea is you want to set clear expectations for everybody, and audits help do that. They help set the standard for what it is that you're trying to get to, for what level of compliance, if you will, that you're trying to get to. And the easiest way to do that is with a robust audit plan. You want to make sure that plan is non-confrontational. One company I was at had a large company, actually. They had a audit team. So there was a audit leader and then half a dozen or so auditors that they would use. And in some cases, when the leader would go around, everybody would scramble. You know, I mean, I witnessed it myself during the tour. There was just this feeling in the room when she came in, and that goes to a few different issues. One, the culture had turned into one of fear, where people were afraid of the auditor, afraid of the audits. And clearly, management really screwed that up, because that should never be the place. That's a whole other topic and be a whole other webinar about how to implement a full 5S audit plan and do it appropriately. But the key is to make sure that the auditors are properly trained on how to conduct an audit and to realize that audits, they're a human experience for the person being audited. You need to take that all into account. Realize that you're talking to another coworker, a human being, and whatnot. And if you don't handle that with tact and diplomacy and some empathy, you're going to be sorry, and it'll set things in the wrong direction from the start. The audit should be a learning experience. The whole key to all of this, right, in lean and whatnot, is continuous improvement. So the audit should be considered a way to improve. You're always trying to get better, and you're learning from those experiences. So if the audits are done properly, you know, there are good things that are going to come up, and people should be praised for them. There are areas of improvement to be made, and there should be a feeling and a culture whereby those improvements are a good thing to find, right? So that we could just get better. That's the plan. You want to make sure you have an easy to follow, standardized process for doing audits. You should have a written procedure on how the audits are going to be conducted, who's going to do them, how often they're going to be done, what you're going to do with the scoring, who's, you know, when I said who's going to be in the audits, so people, I've found companies do this many different ways, but is the manager and the auditor just going to walk around? Is just the auditor going to walk around in the area? Are they going to talk to the people in the area? Are they just going to come in and audit and bolt and then go out back to their desk, fill in a chart and post it where nobody will see it? Right? That isn't the way to do it at all. But some companies do it that way. However you're going to do it, obviously you want to do it right, but however you're going to want to do it, you have to standardize it so that there's an actual procedure in how it is you're conducting the audits, you're communicating the results, you're working with the people. You want to make sure the audits are visible and communicated, so make sure that the results of the audit are posted. Make sure during the audits, this goes back to what I talked about a minute ago, whether they're being done right or wrong, the right way to do them is to make sure to be talking to the people in the department, getting their input, making sure they're clear on the standard and the scoring, which we'll go over in a minute. Get their ideas, you know, praise them when you can, let them know when they've slipped, but make sure that all of the communication is open. It's really important. Simple and straightforward scoring. So one of the common questions that come up is how should we do our scores on audits? Should we just have a yes-no auditing plan as far as scoring goes? Should it be based on a 1 through 5 and somebody just says, okay, that's a 3, or somebody else might grade it a 4? There's a lot of different ways of doing audit scoring. One way that I found that was particularly effective, I've borrowed from GBMP. I'm going to show this to you. So this is their audit checklist, pretty much. And the way this works is, let's say, for example, right here, in set in order. If you wanted to score this, hopefully you can read this. The tools are at a point of use in storage is visual, easy to see, retrieve, and return. Well, let's say you're in an area and you find 2 instances where that's not the case. So you come over here, number of non-conformances. 2 non-conformances you found for that particular part of the audit. Then you would just grade them a 3 for that. You put that in there. So it's based on the number of non-conformances. The great thing about this layout is it makes it very straightforward as to what the score should be, as opposed to somebody just being in the area and saying, okay, I think this is a 3, this might be a 4, this could be a 1. It's very subjective. If you have a legend, if you will, like up here, it makes it a lot easier to make it very clear to how the scoring is being done, as opposed to there being too much subjectivity. Okay, cross-functional. So for an audit plan to be helpful and useful, getting people from other departments doing audits is really a good idea, because you'll get different ideas from different folks, for one, and it helps build teamwork as well, because it's including everybody. And if you pull even managers, senior managers out of their corner office or whatever to come in and be part of the audits. That could be good too, as long as they're not being confrontational and whatnot. But just getting more people involved across the company is a really great idea. It just includes everybody. And like I mentioned, the audit plan has to be managed. So you've got to decide how often you're doing it and stay on track. Make sure somebody is responsible for posting the scores, posting any improvements, following up with the auditors as far as training them on how to talk to people properly, etc. So it really does need its own little bit of focus so that it's managed well, so that you're continually improving in this regard and you get the best benefit you can out of the audit plan. Accountability, which to me is key for sustaining a 5S program. So this little blurb right here, this guy's saying 5S on the job site, I guess I can try it. And Yoda's over here saying it's do or do not, there is no trying. So that is not a direct quote from the movie, by the way, but it's pretty close. The idea here is people have to know what's expected of them and they need to be held accountable to do so. The second accountability is out the door. You can just might as well pack up your 5S program and go home, because it's not gonna sustain. You don't have a prayer. How do you hold people accountable? Well, that's the key question. A couple years ago, I came across a strategy that I thought was pretty cool, and I actually implemented it somewhere when I saw a perfect opportunity for it to work. It's the job of the manager, the group lead, and the supervisor to hold everybody accountable. What will happen is you'll get people that'll go with this walk-by syndrome, and if that happens, you're doomed. So what do I mean by that? I'll give you an example. I was touring a warehouse, and there was a warehouse manager, a group lead, and the warehouse workers. So there was a receiver who was just finished unpacking a tractor trailer, if you will, and the group lead happened to be out there while I was touring, and I was with the warehouse manager. Well, the guy that had unloaded the truck took the forklift and just parked it anywhere. The trailer was gone. There weren't any other trailers, any other docks or whatnot. He just parked it like in the middle of the warehouse. Not the right way to leave a forklift at all, but 10 feet from him was an area specifically marked off for that particular forklift, because the forklifts were all numbered and their locations were numbered too. And the group lead, you know, again, I was just watching from a distance. Group lead didn't do a thing about it. I came back a while later. The forklift was still there, and the group lead was in the area talking to that same gentleman and whatnot. We continued with the tour. The forklift didn't move for nearly an hour. That might be a little extreme. Some people say, well, for crying out loud, it's a warehouse. Why does that have to go back in its spot? If it's an item that's going to be used, excuse me, every 2 minutes, then fine, right? I mean, it's just silly to constantly like put a hammer away on a pegboard hook if you're using it constantly. That makes sense. But this place wasn't a busy warehouse in the least, and it really should have been put back in its spot. But the key here is the group lead needs to hold that worker accountable. That group lead person, you know, however you're structured, the first line of supervisory that's involved for your workers, that person is absolutely key for you to train them properly and for you to hold them accountable, to hold the rest of the people that report to them accountable. If you can get that group lead trained properly and to realize that, you know what, you're in a lead position. I know these might be your buddies, but when they're not doing what's expected of them, you need to call them out. If you can get them to do that properly, your 5S program will just change overnight. It's a huge piece of sustaining 5S. Now, it's also up to that warehouse manager to do the same thing. Not only does he have to hold the group lead accountable, but he also has to hold the workers accountable. If a manager just walks by an area where something is out of conformance, meanwhile his worker that's responsible for that area is right there, and the manager just walks on by, well, what expectation are you setting? He's setting the expectation that he doesn't care. So if the manager doesn't care, the worker isn't going to care. He's going to say, all right, it's not a priority enough. I hope this makes sense to you folks, because honestly, that if you can nail this one, you're going to see a significant improvement in your 5S program. I think 5S should be part of performance evaluations. If it's that important in the organization, then people should know that they're going to be evaluated on it. And again, it's important, as the bottom piece says right there, for you to coach your folks properly and to set clear expectations as well. If you're not setting clear expectations, it is completely unfair for you to hold them accountable during a performance evaluation if they don't know what's expected of them, if you haven't held them accountable throughout the year. And we all know, managers should know that anyway. It's Management 101 for performance evaluations. Make sure people know what's expected of them. But as far as 5S goes, that's why it's so important to have the standards in place and the audits in place to help set those expectations. And then when people go outside of the expectations, you hold them accountable. On the same note, make sure that when you're doing so, and make sure when the group leads are doing so, and they're finding something out of whack, that they're respectful of the person, they're not speaking down to them, they're just giving them some coaching and guidance, that's all. Remember, it's not about the person itself, it's about whatever it is they're doing, right? So if they're doing something wrong, you need to get them to do it right and explain to them what it is that you expect. So, sorry to beat a dead horse, but that's a big one. Okay, so in summary, the 5 steps for sustaining a 5S program are to have clear communication, management musts, get standards in place, make sure you have a robust audit program, and to hold people accountable. And now we will take any questions.
Okay, thank you. And now we're, as David mentioned, that we'll review any questions. So if you do have any questions for David, please submit them on the right side of your screen and I'll read them. And our first question is, please share names of companies that do have such a great 5S program.
Oh, that's a great one. Let's see. I would say, and hopefully this is okay for me to say, but I don't know why it wouldn't be. General Cable has done a fantastic job with their 5S program. I also think Bristol Myers Squibb is another one that comes to mind that I've been to, and I've seen great things done there. Rock 10 here in Massachusetts has done some great things, as has Judd Wire. I've seen some really fantastic programs there as well. Off the top of my head, those are 4 that just happen to come to mind.
Great, thank you. Do you feel it is too rigid on the 5S, do you feel it is too rigid on the audit to be yes, no? If any non-conformances are found, then the answer is no. Document the non-conformance and expect it is corrected before the next audit.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of folks use the whole yes-no methodology, and I think it's a decent way to go. As long as you manage it right and handle it right, following up with folks is absolutely key. I find personally, I don't like just the yes-no answer because I think it's too vague. That's why I prefer going, the other route. It's not something I've ever found that's been particularly effective.
Okay. The next question is, our plant has a very mature workforce and a 5S program in place for many years and is followed extremely well. what suggestions do you have to keep it vibrant?
That's a great question. I actually get that a lot. Well, one thing to do is to figure out what it is that has worked well over all those years. You know, sometimes we think we need to, you know, recreate something because it's been going well for so long. I would say, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I suppose one thing that you could do, I don't know how they're doing their audits and their team meetings and that type of thing, but maybe move people along throughout the site. So maybe have other people auditing other areas if they haven't done that before. Again, not sure what they have for like reward and recognition programs, but maybe mix those up a little bit. Having some contests can be kind of fun if they're done properly. Let's see. I would definitely look to see who hasn't been involved in the audits, because that can give a whole different perspective. You know, even if you could get the CEO to come out there and do an audit, that would kind of throw things into a bit of a spin. But I think mixing it up a bit is one way to keep it going, to add some excitement to it.
Okay, great. Another question. When you say standard, are you speaking to the process area with shadow box, etc., or the color coding for these areas?
Yes. I mean, standardize everything, right? So I'm talking more about visual controls, if you will. So make sure that if you're going to use, for example, blue tool shadow tape, then blue tool shadow tape should be used everywhere. You don't use red here, blue there, yellow there, green there, unless you have color coding per workstations or whatnot. If you're going to have documents posted throughout the facility, you know, just simple 8x11s or whatever, don't tape them here, magnetize them there, put them on put them in a sheet protector in another spot, have all different fonts and colors. Standardize even that. So you could standardize how you're hanging things, if you will. So basically, standardizing your visual controls is what I'm speaking to.
Okay. Another question is, one question I have is this: on setting standards, do you have any suggestions on overall standards across the entire network? We have some plants that are great in our network and then some that struggle. I would think that an overall standard would help, but we are in various stages as well, so it is not easy implementation either. Suggestions?
So I think what they're saying is they have multiple sites, and various sites have different standards, or maybe just low scores. So I've helped a couple of companies implement 5S across like multiple facilities. The key is absolutely to, if the company itself wants the same standard across all facilities, then you have to implement it that way. You can't have one standard in one place and one standard in another. If you talk of multiple buildings, can you maybe read that over again?
I'm sorry. I think what it was that one of the places does really great and the other one is struggling. So right now they don't have an overall standard, and the thought was, would overall standards help?
Okay. Well, if it's, I guess the word places is what's maybe throwing me. If they're talking about places within the same building, then standards would absolutely help. And if they have multiple facilities, they should have the same standard across all the facilities. that can help in so many different areas. When people change, from one job to another within the same company and they change facilities, they're able to, keep the same standard in motion. If you have only one standard and there's an area that is, forgive me, failing or just not doing as well, keeping up with the standards, you could borrow people from the areas that are doing really well and help them train the others. So one standard across the board just helps in so many different regards.
Right, and clarification, thank you for the clarification. They did mention that they have different standards where blue means one thing in one place and something else in another. So
well, that's a recipe for disaster.
Okay.
If you can, I would totally avoid that. And my information's there. If anybody wants to email me, if that person wants to talk more about that, I'd be happy to give them some ideas.
Okay, great. We have several more questions. So how do you incorporate 5S into a performance evaluation with multiple shifts and process owners, or is it a shared goal?
Well, what I used to put in my performance evaluations is a certain number of 5S improvements that they needed to do per, whatever that period was per year or what have you. I would hold everybody accountable to being involved in at least one Kaizen event. So it wasn't so much a stretch goal. I mean, these were all attainable, but it was meant to keep them involved. And it would be on an individual basis. I didn't do it as a team because the performance evaluations are for individuals. Hopefully that helps answer their question.
Okay, great, thanks. What is an acceptable amount of idle time before something should be back in its home?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a great question. I think it's so general, it kind of depends on what it is exactly. I wish I knew if they had a really good example I could tell them. But there isn't one standard that's out there. It's kind of common sense, I think. I wish I just had a number to throw at it. Personally, I would think 15 minutes or so would be reasonable. It depends on what you're doing. If you're on a workbench and you're building something and you're constantly using that tool, then that's one thing. But if you're on a workbench and you're building a widget and you only need that tool once during that build, it should go back immediately. There's no reason to leave it on the bench. Same thing for like a tape gun. If you're out picking and packing something, boxing something up, and you don't have any other orders coming down for probably half an hour, that should be put away. Should be put away immediately. But if you're going to use it within a couple of minutes, it just makes no sense whatsoever to just keep putting it back.
Okay, great.
Kind of vague, but it's hard to nail it. That's a tricky question, though.
Mm-hmm. Great. And is there a better time than others to do an audit? Is it like middle of a busy day, or what would you recommend?
That's a good question, too. First of all, I wouldn't schedule the audits necessarily, because then people will know you're coming, which might sound kind of bad, but it doesn't do anybody any good if they know there's an audit coming and they clean up ahead of time. I mean, what's the point of that? So, but to the exact question, I used to do them at any particular point in the day, because you want to see, for one, you don't want people to know that you're on your way, and if they always know it's going to be, in the morning at a certain time, then that doesn't help in that regard. But I think it depends on the business. If you can do it when you're not in the busiest time of the day, I think that's good to avoid that, because nobody's, if you're so buried because you're trying to get something out the door, for example, well, the last thing you want to deal with is somebody going over your process improvements right then. You want to be respectful of their time and what they have going on at that time. So I suppose with that said, I would go with, the slower periods of time during the day to make it, just more agreeable and doable for everybody.
Okay. What is your opinion on self-audits and cross-audits?
I don't think I've ever self-audited myself. That's a whole other discussion on self-improvement and whatnot. I think self-audits, honestly, are kind of useless with regards to 5S. I've never actually been asked that question, but I think it's very hard for you to be honest with yourself. I mean, maybe you'll be even more critical on yourself, in which case that doesn't do you any good either, but I think it's the best idea to have somebody conducting the audit alongside you if you're responsible for an area. Somebody else should be doing the audit and walking through the audit with you and pointing out the good and the bad, and you having a discussion around why things either met expectations or didn't. To have that discussion with yourself, you're not going to see what other people see. So to just self-audit, you're going to miss stuff that other people are going to see. And over time, the whole thing, right? You put a picture in your room or whatever, and after 3 or 4 days, you don't even see it anymore, even though you just keep walking by it. Same idea. So you want others there to see, and I think cross-functional is fantastic, and people from other areas in other departments in to help with the audits is really a good idea because it brings them a whole other perspective.
Okay. Would you agree that great 5S goes hand in hand with great safety? And could you give some comments on this?
I absolutely do. That a lot. I had somebody last week at a trade show say to me, "What are you doing with 5S? It's 6S now." And I'm like, "Oh God." So safety, without a doubt, is a huge benefit of 5S because the area is going to be cleaner, it's going to be more organized, it's going to be less tripping hazards, you're going to be reaching less, stretching less, etc. So it definitely goes hand in hand, no doubt about it.
Okay, good. And then how long should a 5S event take?
An event? Well,
Yes.
Event is kind of vague. It depends on what you mean. If you're just talking like setting in order a particular area, it really all depends. If you're talking about implementing 5S start to finish in a new workspace, we actually do that, and I usually plan, depending on the size of the space, 3 to 5 days. If we did a full-blown, just shut the whole place down for a week, you could implement and train a whole group and train the trainer on a 5S area. But I guess without knowing further detail, it's kind of hard to answer, what they consider as a 5S event.
Okay. And then are 5S's to be sustained by the system or by the people? So are 5S's to be sustained by the system or the people?
Well, the system needs to be managed by the people, so I would say that it would get sustained by the people. But that's only if you have a solid system in place, which again is managed by the people.
Okay. And then we have another question. What have you found hits home with operators to understanding the importance and value of 5S on a personal level?
Oh, really good question. What I think works best is to explain to them the real benefits to it on a personal level. So think of it this way. I've used this example before. You're sitting there with your kid, right? And you're taking them to the movies. Or you get ready to take them to the movies. They're all excited. They want to go to the movies. You already bought your tickets and whatnot. Or actually, no, you haven't bought your tickets yet. The movie just came out, so you know you got to get there. Well, and guess what? You can't find your keys, right? So what happens? you get all panicked. Your kid's just looking at you, hoping that you're going to do what you need to do for them, but you can't find your keys. So you look in your pockets, you check your drawers, you're looking everywhere. You go down to your vehicle, you're going out of your mind. Before you know it, you're all stressed out, your kid's getting upset, you're getting mad at your kid, and everybody's unhappy. But then, boom, out of the clear blue, you find your keys and everything's good again, right? In the interest of 5S, it can dramatically help improve your enjoyment of your job day in, day out, and reduce your stress levels. Because nobody, people at the core want to do what's expected of them when they have a job. You can't do that job if you don't have your tools. If you don't have whatever it is that you need to do your job, again, whether it's information, materials, or tools, you can't do your job. So if you have a 5S program in place and everything is where it needs to be, your stress levels are going to be dramatically reduced, and you're just going to enjoy doing what you're doing because you're able to do what it is you're getting paid to do, and you're able to do what you enjoy doing. So for me, it's a stress remover, from a personal level.
Okay, great. We're running out of time. So thank you, everyone, for your questions. And any questions that are not answered, I'll ask David to respond to them. And thank you, David, for a very insightful presentation. This brings our webinar to a close. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, June 11th, titled The Role of Sales in a Lean Organization with Joseph Dagger. Please visit AME.org under the AME Events and Training tab for more information and to register. And don't forget to fill out the short survey that will be in your inbox. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a productive day.
Thank you.